Hey everyone, this is Tappers here again, and welcome to a brand new project that I'm doing for this channel. As you can see, we've got Kirby's Dream Collection, which 5 years ago they released for the Nintendo Wii as Kirby's 20th anniversary, which in about 3 months it'll be Kirby's 25th anniversary. But we're not going to talk about the 25th, we're going to talk about the 20th anniversary because Kirby's gotta suck it in and become even more cute and adorable and squishy looking, along with all the Waddle Dees and all the gold heart-shaped blocks, except star blocks, to make the 20th anniversary. And just so you know, this Kirby version you're seeing here is more along lines of Kirby's Return to Dreamland, and I guess you could say Kirby Triple Deluxe, which is one of the most recent games I decided to get recently, and it's pretty cool, I would say. But enough about that. We're going to dive right into Kirby's Dream Collection for the Wii. We've got some options for some challenge stages, learn some history, but we can talk about that history when we go into classic titles, which features 6 games. The first 6 of the main series. The first one we are going to go after is Kirby's Dreamland for the Game Boy. This was released August 1st, 1992. Oddly enough, his first game was not actually on the NES and was on the brick of a Game Boy, which I did have, but interestingly enough, this wasn't my introduction to the Kirby series. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but just a little facts we should learn about the Kirby series, and one of them being that Greens is pretty much the proper stage for Kirby, as we see the hilarious antics that is Kirby in grayscale. But so Kirby's controls, he can walk left or right, he can float, he can suck enemies in, and he can spin back out, or he can swallow them whole because he's an endless, supermassive black hole. That's why he can also get drunk without any sort of repercussions. Just don't drink and drive, obviously. So this game was created by HAL Laboratories, well, under Nintendo, by Masahiro Sakurai. He's the main composer, and you probably know him for, well, Kirby and, of course, Super Smash Bros., which kind of goes without saying. As for the composing music, which pretty much Kirby is definitely best known for, is created by Jun Ishikawa. So a lot of the music you hear from him, I mean, give him a round of applause because pretty much all the games have great Kirby music. But I should kind of talk a little bit more about the story and kind of things that go on in the Kirby series. A lot of the enemies you see, this takes place in Dreamland. And as you know, this is Kirby. He's actually a pink Puffball Marshmallow Stay Puft Man. In this game on the box art, he's actually white for some reason because I guess Sakurai originally wanted him to be pink, which he is in every other game. Although Shigeru Miyamoto wanted him to be yellow, but I guess because they wanted to cater to the Game Boy style where it's black and white, grayscale, whatever you want to call it, they decided to go and have him be a marshmallow color on the box art. So it's what it is, it doesn't really matter. But anyway, we have our first boss of the Kirby series, and pretty much a staple from here on out, Wispy Woods. The story basically goes that King Dedede, the king of Dreamland, stole all the food from the folks of Dreamland, along with the Sparkling Star, which I actually didn't really know about until recently. So Kirby has to go find out the culprit of... Well, he kind of already knows who the culprit is of the food theft as we go into Castle Lolo. Wispy Woods is just, I guess, trying to protect all the apples that King Dedede stole. It's kind of hard to say, but that's what it is. One thing that this game... now, for those that haven't played the original Kirby game, is that Later games would have abilities and stuff, but this game has cheap-shotting enemies that can just disappear, invulnerable enemies that you can't do anything about, and then they just decide to ambush you, kind of like what happened there. But yeah, it's kind of brilliant like that. So we have a mini boss in this stage, Lolo, and for those that might be familiar with the name Lolo, this character is from Lolo Lala's Adventure for the NES, or whatever it's called. Or Adventures of Lolo and Lala. It's, I guess, a puzzle game for the NES, and probably one of Hal's first works of art. I'm not really sure because I never really played it, but that's besides the point. One interesting thing, now, I will say that the first game of the Kirby series that I played was, I think, Superstar. As far as games that I owned, the first one that I actually picked up first, I think was Kirby's Block Ball, which is a spin-off title, and then I eventually owned Kirby's Dreamland 2, which may or may not be the next game I decide to do, even though it's not next in the timeline. But I'll get more on that later. So now we have our boss Lolo and Lalala. Pretty much this is all they do, is that they appear out of random holes, push blocks to the opposite end, and you need to go up and down and all around the platform landscaping of this castle and just shoot back at them. They each have 3 HP, or hit points, or life meter, or I don't know what I should really call it because, well, yeah. One interesting thing as far as these bosses, they do come back in Superstar, although they are in this game called Spring Breeze, which they're actually located on this next stage called Float Islands, because they decided not to bring Castle Lolo back, and instead decided to make Float Islands the boss here, and it's a little weird. They do revamp the stage, but so there's that. But Float Islands has got some pretty cool music, got some bombs that you can shoot out, got some Waddle Doos that we just suck in, and then we also learned that Kirby can't exactly swim when he's holding an enemy in his mouth, so don't eat and try to swim because you'll get cramps, kind of like what happened to Kirby there. But this stage is kind of how weird the series of Kirby can get, because you got cannons that just fall underwater. You've got octopuses that are pretty much this series bloopers from the Mario games and all that. You got some mics that can pretty much blow out the ears of the entire field. You got lag for all the sprites. That everything's here, but I'm not complaining because it's what it is. Moai heads, inspired by Easter Island, of course, because we're out in the ocean. Also, got hit by a coconut, which explodes. Don't worry about that. Now, I mentioned Kirby can't really swim underwater when he's holding an enemy. He can technically swim in this game, but it's really weird if you play the other games and not this, because he just walks midair mid-water in the water. And we also learned another thing about this game. Apparently Gordos can do additional damage, question mark? It's kind of hard to say because I have 2 life, and typically when Kirby takes a hit, he's only supposed to take like 1 unit of damage. Of course, this game uses health pellets for energy, health, whatever you want to call it, while other games use a life meter, so the damage variance can be kind of unusual. Speaking of unusual, spicy curry. We can shoot fireballs out of our mouth. If you're ever wondering where the inspiration to the curry for Super Smash Bros. Brawl came from, I guess it came from this one, and I didn't even know that originally. Now, I want to say this is maybe attention to detail or really good timing, but I think the water puts out the spicy curry, but I could be wrong. It's kind of hard to say. Now, I never really mentioned what the name of a lot of these enemies are, but some of the basic ones we have, like those octopuses, I think are called squishies. The first enemies we see in the game, actually hold that thought because we need to encounter Moby Dick of the world as he shoots us into what is going to be stage 4, which I won't mention yet, but because first we need to grab this mini leaf because it's inspired by minty fresh gum that I can't think of. It's Trident or it's Dentine Ice as we face Kabula. This is kind of an obscure boss. It's basically DDD's private blimp that shoots cannonballs and stuff. We don't ever see this boss again until Kirby Superstar Ultra. Kind of weird that. Although, that's talking about main series games. If you're talking about just any game in general, the next game he's in is Kirby's Block Ball, which is kind of weird, but anyway, speaking of weird, we have Bubbly Clouds, the 4th stage, which is also in Kirby Superstar and all that. But we have these weird ghost missile enemies because of all the bumps they have. And we also get introduced to one of my least favorite enemies in the entire, probably in the series, Scarfies. You can't suck up these enemies, these floating pillow demon heads, and they can also explode. You have to basically shoot an air pellet at them. But in the meantime, we just suck up the Paracel Waddle Dees and Waddle Doos. Fortunately, I'm getting their names right this time because this is actually the second recording I'm doing of this game because I made a lot of omissions and kind of errors in the other video, but I don't know, maybe these can both work out. That's a Sir Kibble, so he's kind of a mainstay as well from the first game, which I kind of forgot about because, well, one main series or main mechanic we'll see later on, aside from me dying yet again, my 3rd death. Anyway, so Bubbly Clouds, I mentioned this is going to be in Kirby Superstar, but it also has a lot of these enemies that we haven't seen before, like also those flying bird-ish enemies, round enemies there. Those are Bronto Birds, and yeah, they can be a pest because sometimes they're aggressive and they're flying and sometimes they aren't. But then you also have these weird viruses from Dr. Mario's puzzle game or whatever, so gotta careful of them. Unfortunately, we can't use pills because we're in grayscale, so that's kind of unfortunate. This part here, I actually died on a previous recording of footage because, well, the same thing kind of happened in Float Islands, but it's not a big deal here. So, we got a mini-boss on this stage as well. This is Kracko Jr., which is a giant eyeball that has several mini balls that circle around it. I'm not sure what those are. They would be explosives, but he just shoots them out and he still has his cloud shield, I will call it, which is better than the plant shield. No, it's not. But the stage kind of, well, it does take place in the sky, but at times it's kind of hard to tell where you are because, I mean, it looks like there's a bottomless pit, but then you have some stage layout here. So, I mean, fortunately, it's not too bad in that regard, but in a part that we'll see here, there's some other questionable parts, like right there, I almost could hit the spikes, and who knows, maybe that could have killed me instantly, except maybe it wouldn't have. But, and now we get the spicy curry once again, but this is kind of a part where I think they could have done a little better, like, I'm bumping into blocks, I got a ceiling right above my head, and right here, I think I almost die because I didn't quite destroy a block and I couldn't really move forward. Also, Kirby's practicing his moonwalking in midair. That's always great. Now, the last time I actually played this game was during the Hero vs. Zero challenge during one of the first seasons or whatever, but this time I'm finally going through the game fully this time. Well, one full playthrough at least. I mean, there's a little more to this, but it's like not particularly important. what is important is another mainstay of the Kirby series, Kracko. He's a really tough adversary who pretty much does a lot of zoom dashing, thunder waves, thunder shocks, and sends out a lot of Waddle Doos. It's pretty much a theme at this point that Waddle Doo is his flunky and all that. But Kracko's not too difficult in this game because, well, yeah. I mean, it didn't explain anything, but I mentioned that bosses like Wispy Woods are pretty much in the entire Kirby series or whatever. Kracko appears in a good majority of the games, but there's actually 2 games he does not appear in, and one of them is on this Dream Collection, and that's Kirby 64, oddly enough. He doesn't make any appearances as far as I know, and he also doesn't appear in Return to Dreamland. That's a game I haven't played yet, but I do own it. Eventually I will get to that game, but not right now. As we get to Mount DDD, which had pretty much a blank background as we just travel in the sky as his floating fortress, or I'm sorry, his moving castle. It's DDD's moving castle, not Howl's, but whatever. We have a boss rush, which is sort of like a mini stage, and then we get the bosses we fight at the end after we touch Nega Shadow Kirby or whatever. But one thing to note about Kracko is that the game can have some slowdown if both him and the Waddle Doo decide to use Thunder Wave, Thunder Shock, whatever. So it's a bit glaring, but it's not a big deal. The other thing I was going to say is that for some really weird reason, they decide to not use the boss music once you get to the boss rush part, or I mean, it just uses the stage music, which I'm perfectly fine with because even though this is a really simple game, it does have some really good tracks. And Kracko's being very uncooperative. I think this is like 30 seconds of him doing absolutely nothing. And I'm just going to wait here, and yeah, he's going to have to get some laser eye surgery after that. But now, I mentioned that the refight against Kubula that we're going to be coming up to, he only appears in 2 games, or I mean, the next game he appears in is Kirby's Block Ball. But now, as far as me playing that game or LPing it or doing whatever, the next game of this series that I do is probably going to be Kirby's Dreamland 2. Though the next game in the series is actually Kirby's Adventure. Whether I'm going to actually... I'm most likely going to be doing the remake Kirby's Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland, because honestly, I have more nostalgia with that game than I do Adventure. Mostly because I didn't play Kirby's Adventure on the NES, although I did watch probably some friends of mine back then play it. Also, this masked enemy here is a complete jerk because I couldn't suck him up, and he's acting like the one enemy from, what was it? Mario Bros. 2. Those masks that I can't think of that pretty much chase after you. But we have a refight with Lolo and Lala. And one thing I remember, or maybe sort of remember, is that Kirby doesn't just do games, video games and all that, but it also has a cartoon series, which I think these two, Lolo and Lala, did appear in those, but it's kind of hard to say. I did watch some of the cartoon as a kid, or teen adult, I should say. I don't really remember when the cartoon series came up, but it was called Kirby Right Back At You or something. I don't really remember, but it has a lot of the classic characters like DDD, the Giant Mao, Moai Head, and also Meta Knight. Oh, I'm sorry, spoiler, we aren't supposed to mention him because we don't know who he is yet. Which makes me think I should just go ahead and do Nightmare Dreamland, although Kirby's Dreamland 2 doesn't even have him, so that's kind of a moot point anyway. But we fall down and we're going to face Wispy Woods one last time in this I never mentioned some of the things that he does, but it's pretty much drop apples, shoot air bolts somehow out of his mouth, most of which will just sail right over your head. But seeing all these apples makes me hungry for some more food today. I mean, I'm also thirsty as we get ready to fight DDD in a boxing ring with self-proclaimed art giving the peace sign as we face off in no holds bar. Final destination, Fox only, no items. Except, not really. Well, we don't use items, we use stars, and that's pretty much it. He has a hammer, he has ground pounds, he can also suck you up and stumble, because that's what he's good at. Now, my first experience with Kirby's Dreamland, I kind of had a little bit of a hard time beating King Dedede, mostly because the battle takes a while, and some mechanics that I was mostly familiar with before this, like when I played Superstar and Dreamland 2, this fight seems very long and kind of just average or whatever, but it's great for how simple it is starting out. So there's that. Now the only difficulty with this fight is that sometimes he just, with the hammer, he'll move further than he really should, because a lot of cases he will swipe where he's about to hit you instead of just moving at a random set interval or whatever. Also, another thing I should mention is that sometimes you can inhale two things at once, as we send him off like Team Rocket blasting off again out this castle, and we get all the stars back, the sparkling stars, which will combine into one as Kirby does his little jig of awesomeness. And to end this, we just grow large into a parachute right through the roof of his castle, and we just take the castle, uprooting it off the ground, and yeah, it's raining food. As that's the end of Kirby's Dreamland, with all the credits as we go into the Sunset Vista Hill Boulevard Broken Dream. No, except not really. So yeah, this is Kirby's Dreamland, which is a game that doesn't really take very long. It should only take you about half hour at most. But in speedrun sense, it takes maybe 12 minutes. As we watch the credits, thanking Jun Ishikawa, Bubby, Cypher, and of course Sakurai, HAL Laboratory, Nintendo, and eventually thanking the player for thank you so much for playing my game. And there's a game I need to really play, Super Mario 64. Who knows when that'll happen, but yeah, thank you for playing. As we just get ready to dump off the food at the village proper of Dreamland, which all the stars just hold the castle up. That's perfectly normal, by the way. But yeah, we will bye-bye. Yeah, Kirby kind of looks a little flat in a way, but fortunately he'll have some better qualities later on, along with all the other characters like the Wild Dews, and seeing DDD spaz out with the open mouth and all that other stuff. Yes, there is an extra game in this game. It's supposed to be like a hard mode or whatever, with some added difficulty or whatever, more enemies and all that other stuff. I'm not going to be doing that because I don't really see a point to it. So the next time I do the Kirby series, it'll probably be either Dreamland 2 or Nightmare in Dreamland for the GBA. So this has been Tapras, and I will see you again next time. Take care.